I never believed in breaking points until mine arrived on a Thursday evening, disguised as chicken parmesan. My mother served it with a side of brutal honesty I hadn't ordered. Maya, she said, her fork scraping against porcelain, we need you to understand something. When decisions need to be made in this family, Rebecca's needs will always take priority. That's just how it is. The words didn't explode. They seeped, like ink bleeding through paper, staining everything beneath. My father continued cutting his chicken, nodding slightly, as if she'd just commented on the weather. Rebecca, my older sister, didn't even look up from her phone. She'd heard this before. She'd always known. I sat there, fork suspended midair, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. Not heartbreak. Something colder. Clarity. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled the hierarchy that had defined my entire existence, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And be honest. Have you ever realized you were the safety net in your own family, there to catch everyone else while you fell alone? My name is Myra Restrepo, and for 32 years, I existed in a role I never auditioned for. The reliable one. The low-maintenance daughter. The backup plan with a pulse. I didn't recognize this as my role because no one announced it. There was no family meeting, no official declaration. Just 1,000 small moments that accumulated like sediment, eventually hardening into the foundation of who I was allowed to be. I grew up in Portland, in one of those craftsman houses with a wide front porch and neighbors who waved from their gardens. Picture perfect from the outside. But inside, there was an invisible current, a flow of attention and resources that moved in one direction, always toward Rebecca, always away from me. She wasn't cruel about it. That would have been easier to name, easier to fight. She simply accepted it as a natural order, the way you accept gravity. My sister possessed something I couldn't identify as a child, but recognized later as the ability to need loudly. She needed dramatically, urgently, constantly. And families, I learned, organize themselves around the loudest need. When Rebecca struggled in high school, tutors materialized. When she couldn't decide on a college major, she took 3 gap years while my parents funded her self-discovery journey through Europe. When she had a bad breakup, our family vacation was postponed so she could heal at home. I learned to need quietly, which meant learning not to need at all. I became fluent in a language I didn't realize I was speaking. The language of don't ask, don't burden, don't take up space that belongs to someone more important. Resilient, they called me. Independent. Strong. I collected those words like badges, not understanding they were actually consolation prizes for being emotionally convenient. The evidence accumulated in my memory, like photographs, in a drawer you can't quite bring yourself to throw away. My 14th birthday, when we had to leave my party early because Rebecca was having a crisis at college, 3 hours away. The birthday cake, half eaten on the counter. Candles never lit. My high school graduation, where I gave the valedictorian speech to an audience missing both my parents. They were at Rebecca's apartment, helping her move because her roommate situation had become, in my mother's words, absolutely unbearable. I stood on that stage, diploma in hand, and scanned the crowd for faces that weren't there. My best friend's mom took photos. She didn't know she was documenting abandonment. College was my escape route. I chose UC Berkeley, as far from Portland as I could justify. I worked 3 jobs, lived in a shoebox apartment with 2 roommates, and learned to stretch ramen into 4 meals. Every time I solved a problem alone, I thought I was proving my strength. I didn't realize I was confirming their belief that I didn't need them. They took my silence as contentment, my independence as preference. The less I asked for, the less they offered, until the well ran completely dry. After graduation, I moved to San Francisco for a tech job. My parents sent a congratulations text with a thumbs-up emoji. Rebecca called 2 days later to tell me about her new relationship, and could I help her move in with him? I flew back to Portland that weekend, loaded boxes, painted her new bedroom. She never asked about my new job. She never asked about my life. I had become a supporting character in a story where she was the only protagonist who mattered. Years passed. The pattern calcified. Phone calls became transactional. Check-ins that were really check-outs. How are you became a formality before the real subject. Did you hear what Rebecca's going through? I became a professional listener, a repository for family drama that never included my own. My mother would call, spend 45 minutes detailing Rebecca's latest crisis, then remember, as if suddenly startled, "Oh, how are things with you?" I learned to summarize my life in 3 sentences or less. Anything longer felt greedy. I dated someone for 2 years. His name was David, and he was patient and kind and slowly realized he was dating someone who'd been taught that her needs were negotiable. He tried to understand the dynamic. But how do you explain a wound that has no blood? When he proposed, I said yes. When I called my parents, my mother said, "That's wonderful. Honey, listen. Can we talk about this later?" Rebecca just found out she's pregnant, and we're all in shock. 3 months later, David and I broke up. Not because he didn't love me, because I couldn't let him. I'd been trained to believe that taking up space was a form of theft. That dinner, the chicken parmesan revelation, happened on a rare visit home. Rebecca had invited me, which should have been my first warning. She never invited me to things unless she needed something. The house smelled like garlic and rosemary. Classical music played softly from the kitchen speaker. My father was already seated, reading something on his tablet. My mother was plating food with that focused energy she brought to tasks she wanted to seem effortless. We ate in relative silence at first. Rebecca talked about her kids, her job, her husband's promotion. I listened, contributing the appropriate nods and questions. Then my mother set down her fork and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern? Preparation? "Maya, we need to have an honest conversation." I remember my pulse quickening, the instinctive fear that I'd done something wrong. "Okay, your father and I have been talking, and we think it's important to be transparent about how we make decisions. It's not that we don't love you. We do. But Rebecca has children now. She has more responsibilities, more pressures. So when it comes to financial support, time, help with things, her family has to come first. That's just the reality." I stared at her. "And I come?" "You're doing well," my father interjected, not looking up. "You have a good career. You're independent. You don't need us the way she does." "So I'm last," I said quietly. "It's not a ranking," my mother said, though her tone suggested it absolutely was. "It's about need." Rebecca finally looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw something that made my stomach turn. Not guilt, relief. Relief that had been said out loud, that she no longer had to pretend we were equal in our parents' eyes. She'd known this truth her entire life. I'd just been slow to catch up. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't flip the table or storm out. I took a sip of water, swallowed carefully, and said, "Thank you for being clear." My mother looked almost pleased, as if my calm acceptance confirmed her point. I was resilient. I was strong. I could handle this. I finished dinner. I helped with the dishes. I hugged everyone goodbye. I drove back to my hotel, hands steady on the wheel, mind eerily blank. It wasn't until I was alone in that sterile room with its industrial carpet and abstract art that something inside me quietly, decisively broke. Not my heart, my compliance. I flew back to San Francisco the next morning. Life continued exactly as it had before, at least on the surface. But underneath, I was calculating. I started seeing my family relationships the way I saw bad code at work, inefficient systems that needed debugging. I looked at my phone records and realized I initiated 90% of our communication. I looked at my bank statements and found thousands of dollars in small transfers, loans that were never repaid, gifts that were never reciprocated, emergencies that were always someone else's. I began an experiment. I stopped reaching out first. No texts, no calls, no check-ins. I wanted to see how long it would take for them to notice my absence. The answer was 17 days. 17 days of silence before my mother texted, "Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" I stared at that message for a long time. Everything okay? As if my silence was a problem to diagnose, not a response to being told I was ranked last in my own family. I typed back, "Everything's fine, just busy with work." A week later, Rebecca called, not to ask how I was, to ask if I could watch her kids next month when she and her husband went to Napa for their anniversary. "It's just a weekend," she said, breezy, confident. "You don't have kids, so it's easier for you." I let the silence stretch. She actually laughed, nervous. "Maya, you there?" "I am," I said, "but I can't help." "What do you mean you can't? Do you have plans?" "No," I said, "I just can't." "That doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," I said. "I'm choosing not to." She hung up on me. 10 minutes later, my mother called. "What's going on with you?" "Rebecca says you're acting strange." "I'm not acting strange," I said. "I'm setting boundaries." "This isn't like you." "Exactly," I said, and I hung up. The fallout was immediate and predictable. My phone lit up with texts. Concern, confusion, accusations disguised as worry. I didn't engage. I turned off notifications and went for a long walk along the waterfront, watching the fog rolling over the bay, feeling lighter than I had in years. I started therapy the following week, not because I was broken, because I needed to understand how I'd allowed myself to become so small. My therapist, Dr. Chun, was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of calm that felt earned. In our third session, she asked me a question that rewired my brain. "Maya, when you think about your family, do you feel like you're part of them or like you're supporting them from the outside?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know. I'd never thought of it that way. I guess I'm supporting them." "And who supports you?" "Silence." "That's what I thought," she said gently. "You've been infrastructure, not family." Infrastructure. The word landed like a key in a lock. I wasn't a daughter. I was a utility. Functional. Reliable. Taken for granted. Over the next months, I began restructuring my life with surgical precision. I moved my emergency fund into accounts my family couldn't access. I changed my mailing address to a P.O. box. I stopped being available by default. When my mother called with updates about Rebecca's life, I'd listen for exactly 5 minutes, then say, "I need to go." I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just left. The real test came 6 months after that dinner. My phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. My father's name on the screen. He never called. I answered, "Maya, we need you to come home this weekend. It's urgent." "What happened?" "I'll explain when you get here." "Explain now," I said. He hesitated. "It's complicated. Financial things. We need to talk in person." "Financial things involving me?" "Just come home, Maya." I felt that old reflex, the urge to pack a bag and fix whatever was broken. But something else rose up, stronger. "If you need something from me, you can ask over the phone. This isn't a conversation to have remotely." "Then it's not urgent enough," I said, and I hung up. He called back immediately. I didn't answer. My mother texted, "Please don't do this. We really need you." I texted back, "I'll call tomorrow at 6 p.m. Have the details ready." When I called at exactly 6 the next evening, the full story spilled out. Rebecca and her husband had invested in a business venture that collapsed. They were facing foreclosure on their house. My parents had co-signed the loan. Now everyone was drowning. The number they needed was staggering. 6 figures. "And you wanted to cover it," I said. "We're asking you to help your family," my mother said, her voice trembling, "by writing a check. By being there when we need you." "Where were you when I needed you?" The question came out before I could stop it. The line went quiet. "Maya, that's not fair," my father said. "You're right," I said. "What's not fair is that you only remember I exist when you need money. We're your family." Rebecca's voice suddenly on the line. She'd been listening the whole time. "Families invest in each other," I said. "You invested in yourself. I invested in myself. Now you want a return on an investment you never made. So you're just going to let us lose everything?" Rebecca's voice cracked. You're going to lose everything either way," I said. "The question is whether I lose everything with you." I told them I'd think about it. I didn't promise anything. I hung up and sat in my apartment, looking out at the city lights, feeling the weight of a decision that would define the rest of my life. Dr. Chun and I spent 3 sessions working through it. "What do you owe them?" she asked. "I don't know." Let me rephrase. What have they invested in you? I thought hard. They raised me. They gave birth to you and provided basic necessities. That's the baseline responsibility of parenthood, not an investment. What did they do beyond that? Did they show up to your milestones? Did they support your dreams? Did they make you feel valued? The answer to all of it was no. They'd done the minimum and expected maximum return. Here's what I think, Dr. Chin said. If you give them this money without conditions, you're teaching them that you'll always be there to absorb their bad decisions. You'll become a permanent safety net. But if you set real boundaries, there's a chance, a small one, that the relationship could become real. I flew to Portland 2 weeks later, not to rescue them, to propose something else. The house felt different. Smaller, somehow, desperate. My mother had aged in the months since I'd seen her. My father looked worn. Rebecca sat on the couch, her face puffy from crying. I set my bag down and sat across from them. I've made a decision. They leaned forward, hope flickering in their eyes. I'm willing to help, but not the way you want. My father frowned. What does that mean? I pulled out a folder, handed it to him. I'll give you a loan. Not a gift. A loan with interest, repayment terms, and collateral. Rebecca's face flushed. You're treating us like strangers. You've treated me like a bank, I said, so I'm acting like one. My mother scanned the document. There are conditions here. Therapy? Financial counseling? You're making us jump through hoops. I'm making you take responsibility, I said. If I give you money without accountability, I'm enabling the same patterns that got you here. This is cruel, Rebecca said. No, I said, cruel would be letting you drown. This is structure. Sign it or don't. Either way, I'm okay. The silence was suffocating. My father pushed the papers away. We're your family. This isn't how family works. I stood up. You're right. Family shows up. Family invests. Family remembers you exist even when they don't need something. You taught me exactly how family works. I'm just applying a lesson. I walked to the door. My mother's voice stopped me. If we don't sign this, are you walking away? I turned. I'm not walking away from you, Mom. I'm walking to a version of myself that doesn't disappear to make room for everyone else. I gave them 72 hours. They signed. The loan was structured, ironclad, mediated by lawyers. Assets were liquidated. Budgets were slashed. Rebecca's family downsized. My parents sold their second car. Family therapy started the following month, awkward and tense and necessary. I didn't attend every session. Some were just them, learning to function without me as a crutch. But in the sessions I did attend, things cracked open. Rebecca admitted she'd always felt entitled to more because more had always been given. My mother cried, acknowledging that she'd mistaken my strength for invincibility. My father said almost nothing for weeks. Then one day, quietly, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. It wasn't a hallmark ending. It was messy, painful, slow. But for the first time, it was honest. Months turned into a year. Rebecca started paying me back. Small amounts at first, then consistent installments. She texted me on my birthday. Not to ask for something, but just acknowledge the day. My mother called to ask how I was, and actually waited for an answer. The relationship isn't healed. Maybe it never will be. But there's space now. Space where resentment used to fester. Space where obligation used to crush my chest. I still live in San Francisco. I still work in tech. But I also started painting again, something I gave up in college because I thought I didn't have time. I have dinner with friends who know my full story. I'm dating someone new, and when he asks what I need, I'm learning to answer honestly. Last month, Rebecca called, not with a crisis, just to talk. We spoke for an hour. It felt strange and unfamiliar, and like the beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. Sitting in my apartment last week, watching the fog roll over the Golden Gate Bridge, I realized something profound. For 32 years, I thought being last in line meant I had to fight harder to move up. I was wrong. Being last wasn't a position to improve. It was a signal to leave the line entirely. I stopped waiting to be chosen. I chose myself. And that changed everything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the backup plan in your own family, drop a comment below. Share your story. You're not alone, and you're not wrong to want more. And if these stories help you breathe a little easier, hit subscribe. There are more coming. Because your story matters, even when your family forgets to notice.